Hello, family. Please subscribe and leave a like for us. It means the world to us. Also, share this video to your friends and loved ones and turn on post notifications so you don't miss future videos from us. Thank you as you do so. Sit back and relax as we dive into the story. The house didn't feel like home anymore. 14-year-old Rose Adams stood by the hallway, holding her school bag tightly to her chest as she watched her stepmother, Bella, glide across the living room in a silk robe. It had only been a few months since Bella married her father, Robert, and yet the warm energy Rose once knew had been replaced by a cold tension that settled in the walls. Bella was beautiful, graceful even, with a smile that could charm the world. But Rose had learned quickly that behind those painted lips was a woman who watched her with eyes that felt too calculating. "Sweetheart, why don't you go clean up the kitchen before your father comes down?" Bella asked with a syrupy voice, not bothering to look at Rose directly. Rose blinked. The housekeeper had just cleaned it an hour ago. "But I was going to finish my assignment," she said softly. Bella turned, arching a brow. "Then I'll let your father know you've been talking back." Rose didn't answer. She quietly moved toward the kitchen, the sting of those words sinking in deeper than she showed. Ever since her father remarried, it felt like she was slowly being erased from her own life. Her father, Robert Adams, a successful businessman, often left early and came home late. He still kissed her on the forehead and asked about school, but he never seemed to notice how different things had become. Bella always made sure she looked angelic when he was around, serving his food, complimenting Rose, even pretending to care about her studies. But the moment Robert left the room, her smile vanished. Sometimes it was the subtle digs, other times silence so heavy it felt like suffocation. That evening, while washing a plate she hadn't even used, Rose overheard Bella laughing quietly on the phone. "She's too timid, won't last long," she said. The words weren't loud, but they were sharp, slicing through the air like a blade. Rose paused, heart thudding. She didn't know exactly what Bella meant, but something in her gut said it wasn't good. And worse, she knew no one would believe her. Rose woke up early on her 15th birthday, her heart fluttering with quiet hope. She had no grand expectations, just maybe a handwritten card, a small slice of cake, or even a soft happy birthday whispered over breakfast. But as she stepped into the dining room, she found only silence. The table was empty, the chairs unoccupied, and the faint hum of Bella's favorite music drifted in from upstairs. After sitting alone for 15 minutes, Rose finally heard the sound of heels on marble. Bella descended the staircase in a beige designer dress and oversized sunglasses, holding her phone to her ear. "No, I'm heading to the spa first, facial, mani-pedi, the usual," she said with a chuckle. As she passed the dining room, she glanced at Rose, but didn't pause. "Oh, Rose, be a dear and lock the front door before you go to school. The housekeeper's off today," she added, then vanished through the door without so much as a glance back. Later that afternoon, Rose returned from school to find the house still empty. No streamers, no gifts, no messages. The only sound was the soft ticking of the clock above the fireplace and the low ache in her chest. She climbed up to her room and sat on the floor, flipping open her journal. With trembling hands, she wrote, "Maybe she really did forget. Or maybe she just doesn't care." Hours passed before Robert came home. Rose heard the jingle of his keys and his voice calling, "Bella? Rose?" She ran downstairs, her face lighting up slightly. "Hi, Dad," she said, trying to sound casual. "Oh, sweetheart." "How was school?" he asked, pecking her forehead. Before she could respond, Bella appeared from the hallway in a fluffy robe, arms outstretched. "Darling, you're home. My massage ran late. You must be exhausted. Come, I ran you a bath." Robert smiled, charmed. "You're the best, Bella." Rose opened her mouth to speak, but closed it again. Her birthday hadn't crossed either of their minds. That night, she quietly pulled the covers over her head and whispered to the darkness, "Happy birthday, Rose." In the quiet space beneath her pillow lay the only place Rose could speak freely, her journal. It had become her secret world, where she detailed every strange shift in her once stable life. She wrote about the little things. How Bella removed her favorite family photo from the hallway. How her lunch money mysteriously went missing. How the driver who once picked her up from school no longer showed. Today, she scribbled one evening. Bella unplugged the internet and said I had to earn it. When I asked how, she said, try being more invisible. At first, Rose had thought she was imagining things. Maybe Bella was just adjusting to her role as a stepmother. But as the days turned to months, the moments of cruelty sharpened and began to feel calculated. Even her old tutors were suddenly unavailable, and Bella replaced them with new ones who barely showed up. Her grades began to slip, not because she lacked the mind, but because the support she once had was slipping through cracks she couldn't seal. One day, she noticed her math homework, carefully completed and tucked into her bag the night before, had vanished. When she nervously told her teacher she'd done it but couldn't find it, Bella was conveniently present at the school, having come to drop off Rose's forgotten lunch. My dear stepdaughter tends to make up stories when she's overwhelmed, Bella said sweetly to the teacher. But we're working on that at home. Rose stared at her, stunned. That evening, she wrote furiously in her journal, she wants them to think I'm unstable. I don't understand why. She began hiding the journal behind a loose tile in her room, afraid Bella might read it. It became her anchor, her only way of holding on to what was real. Every lie Bella told was countered in those pages. Every manipulation, every moment of gaslighting, every time Bella twisted her reality, Rose wrote it down with the sharpness of a blade. She didn't know yet what she'd do with these words, but a part of her knew. Someday, they would matter. One warm Saturday afternoon, Rose found her father in the backyard, tending to his garden. The sun filtered through the leaves above, casting soft shadows over the small flower beds Robert loved to maintain. She stood by the porch for several minutes, her fingers curled tightly around the journal hidden behind her back. "Dad," she finally called. He turned, wiping sweat from his brow, smiling. "Rosebud, you haven't called me that in a while." She forced a smile and walked over. Her heart beat hard as she searched for the right words. "Can we talk, just us?" she asked. He nodded immediately and sat beside her on the old wooden bench. She hesitated, then began, "I don't think Bella likes me very much. She's been doing things, taking my things, telling my teachers I lie, making me feel like I'm always wrong." Robert's brow furrowed slightly, but before he could say anything, Bella appeared in the doorway, a glass of juice in each hand. "I hope I'm not interrupting," she said cheerfully, walking toward them. "Just wanted to make sure you're staying hydrated." Robert took the glass, smiling gratefully. "You're always looking out for us, Bella." Rose's voice tightened. "I was actually trying to tell Dad something." Bella sat beside Robert and placed a hand on his knee. "Darling, Rose has been under a lot of stress lately. She's been writing, troubling things in a notebook. I didn't want to say anything, but I found it while tidying." Rose's eyes widened in disbelief. She found the journal. "That's not true. You had no right to." "Sweetheart," Bella interrupted gently, "I'm only trying to help you. Sometimes our thoughts get away from us. You've been so withdrawn lately." Robert looked between them, confused and slightly embarrassed. "Rose, is that true?" Rose's voice cracked. "I'm not making it up, Dad. She's doing this on purpose." But Bella simply shook her head and leaned into Robert. "She's grieving still, love. Maybe therapy would help." Robert sighed. "Maybe it's just a phase." And just like that, the wall between Rose and her father grew taller. Later that night, Rose tore out the last journal entry and burned it over a candle, her face lit by fire and fury. That evening, Rose stayed up late, unable to sleep. The soft glow of the hallway nightlight flickered under her door, casting elongated shadows across her bedroom wall. Just past midnight, she got up to grab a glass of water. On her way to the kitchen, she heard soft laughter coming from the study. The door was half shut, the light spilling out like a secret trying to escape. Rose paused, curiosity stirring inside her. She crept closer, her bare feet silent against the floor. Bella's voice rang clearly now, laced with smugness. "It's only a matter of time. She's too soft. If she stays any longer, she'll start asking questions about Robert's accounts." A man's voice replied, "You sure he won't notice?" Bella laughed again. "He only sees what I let him see. As for the girl, well, she won't be around much longer. Trust me." Rose's heart dropped. She stepped back instinctively, her hand flying to her mouth. She had just heard her stepmother plotting her removal, and the certainty in her voice terrified her. The study door creaked suddenly, and Rose darted behind the staircase, holding her breath. Bella stepped out, still on the phone, and walked past without noticing her. Only when the sound of her heels faded did Rose finally exhale. She didn't sleep that night. Her mind ran in circles. What had Bella meant by accounts? Why was she so desperate to get rid of her? And worse, who was she speaking with? The fear that had haunted Rose for months had finally taken form. Bella wasn't just mean or jealous. She was calculating something far more dangerous. The next morning at breakfast, Bella smiled at Rose like nothing happened. "Good morning, sunshine," she chirped, pouring fresh juice. Rose sat down in silence, watching her carefully. Bella glanced up, noticed the stare, and leaned in a little. "You look pale. Are you feeling off?" Her voice was soft, but there was a chill behind the words. Rose clenched her spoon tighter. "I'm fine," she said coldly, but inside, something had shifted. Fear had given way to instinct. She had no proof yet, but she now knew one thing for certain. Bella didn't just dislike her. She was planning something. It started with her school locker. One afternoon, Rose reached in to pull out her backpack and found the contents ransacked. Her notebooks were missing, and the envelope containing her scholarship application had vanished. She checked everywhere, even retracing her steps to the guidance counselor's office, only to be met with confusion. "But we never received your application, Rose," the counselor said kindly. "Are you sure you submitted it?" Rose's voice trembled. "I did. I left it here Friday afternoon." When she got home, she went straight to her drawer where she stored other important papers, her birth certificate copy, bank details, even her mother's last photo, gone. Everything was gone. Rose turned her room upside down, panic rising like a tide, but there was no trace. Later that night, she confronted Bella in the kitchen. "Where are my documents?" she demanded, her voice uncharacteristically firm. Bella raised a brow, slicing strawberries without looking up. "What documents, dear?" "My scholarship forms, my savings records, my ID." Bella finally looked up, eyes sharp and calm. "Maybe," she said coolly. "You never had them to begin with." The words hit Rose like a slap. She stared at her stepmother, struggling to breathe. "You're trying to erase me," she whispered. Bella chuckled softly, placing the knife down. "Don't be dramatic, Rose. You're just a teenager with an overactive imagination." Then, as if to twist the knife deeper, she leaned closer and added, "Besides, it's hard to erase something that doesn't really matter." Rose backed away, feeling like the ground beneath her was slipping. She ran upstairs and searched again, tearing open drawers and boxes, her hands shaking. When Robert returned that evening, she tried to tell him, but Bella had already gotten to him first. "She's going through a phase, darling," Bella said gently over dinner. "Stress, hormones, you know how girls are at this age." Robert nodded with concern. "Maybe we should get her a break from all the pressure." Rose blinked in disbelief. Not only had Bella stolen her things, she had stolen her credibility. She sat at the table, staring into her untouched food, wondering how far this woman would go. The walls were closing in, and she had no idea how to stop it. A week later, Bella approached Rose with unexpected warmth. "Your father and I have discussed your schooling," she said over breakfast, offering a smile too polished to be genuine. "There's a prestigious boarding academy that would suit you better, somewhere quiet, structured, far from distractions." Rose looked up wary. "He agreed to this?" "Of course," Bella replied. "He's out of town on business, but he left everything in my care." That night, Bella helped pack Rose's suitcase, humming as she folded clothes that didn't feel like her own. When morning came, a black car waited outside. "The driver will take you straight there," Bella said. Rose clutched her bag, eyes scanning for Robert, hoping he'd appear and stop it. He didn't. She was barely settled in the car before a cloth pressed against her nose. The last thing she saw was Bella standing in the doorway, waving gently with a smirk. Then darkness. Rose woke to harsh lights and unfamiliar voices. Her wrists were tied, her suitcase gone. She lay in a holding room filled with frightened girls, all roughly her age. Panic surged through her chest. A woman in a red jacket barked orders from behind a clipboard, calling numbers like merchandise. "Lot 206, bring her out." When they dragged Rose into a showroom, her breath caught. Men sat in rows with paddles, whispering and appraising. She wasn't at any school. She had been sold. The fear paralyzed her until one man at the back stood and raised a hand. But he didn't raise a paddle. He showed a badge. "Jeremiah Cole, I'm shutting this down," he barked. Chaos erupted. Rose collapsed to the floor in tears as officers stormed the building. She didn't understand yet what had just happened, but she knew this much. Bella hadn't just tried to erase her. She had tried to destroy her completely. Everything was chaos, screams, footsteps, commands. Rose remained curled on the ground as loud voices filled the auction hall, lights flashing as armed officers secured the exits. It was overwhelming, her body frozen in shock, while her mind struggled to catch up. A pair of hands reached down, but this time they weren't rough. "You're safe now," a deep, calm voice said. She looked up, blinking through tears and sweat, to find a man in a navy coat and badge kneeling beside her. "My name is Jeremiah Cole," he said softly. "You're going to be okay." He didn't force her to move, only waited until she nodded faintly. Once outside, fresh air hit her like a slap. The man guided her gently into a waiting van. Inside were other rescued girls, but he made sure she sat close to him. "Where's your family? Anyone I can call?" he asked. Rose hesitated, then whispered, "They did this to me." Jeremiah's face shifted from concern to realization. "You're saying someone in your family set this up?" Rose could barely form the words, but she managed, "My stepmother. She said it was a school." Jeremiah didn't press further, only nodded and wrapped a blanket around her. "You don't have to say more tonight. You've been through enough." The van took them to a temporary shelter for victims of trafficking. He stayed with her the whole night, declining every officer who tried to take her statement immediately. "She's not just a case file," he told them. "She's a child who was nearly erased." In that safe, quiet place, Rose looked around at the girls beside her, silent, shattered, just like her. For the first time in weeks, she let herself sob without holding back. Jeremiah didn't ask questions. He just stayed, seated at a distance but watchful. And for a girl who had been surrounded by silence and manipulation for too long, that small gesture felt like the first step towards something unfamiliar. Safety. The shelter was tucked away on the outskirts of the city, far from the polished streets Rose once called home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was warm and quiet with soft beds and no Bella. Rose spent the first few days in silence, observing from a distance, not trusting easily. Though the counselors were kind, it was Jeremiah who made her feel somewhat grounded. He visited every day, sometimes sitting in the courtyard reading, sometimes offering a small snack and a gentle, "How are you holding up?" She rarely answered. One afternoon, she finally spoke. "Are they going to arrest her?" Her voice was fragile, nearly cracking. Jeremiah paused. "We're trying. But it's complicated. The kind of people behind these auctions know how to cover their tracks, and your stepmother." She knew exactly what she was doing. Rose clenched her fists. "I don't want to go back there." He met her gaze. "You won't." He explained that her father had traveled out of the country, and no one had reported her missing. Bella had told everyone she'd been sent to a school abroad. "And the worst part," Jeremiah added, "there's no legal trail, no signature, no paper link that ties her to the auction directly." Rose sank deeper into her chair. "So she wins?" Jeremiah shook his head. "Not if you stay alive, Rose. Not if you build a life she never saw coming." Those words lingered. That night, Rose stood in front of the mirror in her room, examining the bruises that had started to fade. They were ugly, but they told a story, one Bella hadn't succeeded in ending. The next day, Rose asked Jeremiah if I wanted to disappear for a while, and maybe come back as someone new. "Could you help?" He looked at her, surprised by the quiet determination in her voice. "Yes," he said simply. "But know this, becoming someone new doesn't mean forgetting who you are. It means choosing who you'll be." And with that, a new chapter in Rose's life quietly began, far from the mansion, far from Bella, and far from everything that once tried to define her. 3 weeks later, Jeremiah drove Rose through narrow countryside roads toward a small town where nobody knew her name. The car ride was quiet, save for the hum of tires on gravel and the occasional song from the radio. Rose sat beside him, hair tied back, clothes simple, face older than her years. From now on, he said, glancing at her gently, you'll be known as Rose Bennett. Your school records, documents, everything's been adjusted. You'll live with a retired teacher named Mrs. Alora. She's discreet, and she understands how to care for someone rebuilding. Rose looked out the window, absorbing it all. Do I have to forget everything? She asked softly. Jeremiah shook his head. No, but you don't have to carry it every day. As the town's welcome sign appeared, Rose's fingers tightened around the notebook in her lap, the only thing she had managed to hide from Bella. Inside it were truths and names. In pain, she planned to keep it. The house she arrived at was old but well kept. Mrs. Alora, a kind woman with a sharp tongue and soft eyes, welcomed her with warm tea and quiet understanding. She didn't pry. Instead, she offered space. You can stay as long as you need, she said. And when you're ready to speak, I'll listen. Rose enrolled in the local high school under her new identity. She kept her head low, focused on her studies, and barely spoke during the first few weeks. But her mind was sharp, her hunger for knowledge intense. At night, she would write in her notebook, revisiting the past not as a victim, but as someone collecting strength. The ache of betrayal was still fresh, but it no longer consumed her, it fueled her. One evening, as Mrs. Alora passed her room, she overheard Rose whispering, I'll return one day. Not to beg, not to explain, but to show her what she built by trying to break me. And from that point on, every class she attended, every page she studied, every late-night scribble she wrote, became bricks in the foundation of her quiet revenge. By the time Rose turned 18, the girl who had once cowered in Bella's shadow no longer existed. She stood taller now, with sharper cheekbones, unflinching eyes, and a quiet calm that unnerved those who underestimated her. Her mornings started early, hours before class, where she'd sit by the window with a law textbook in her lap, years ahead of the curriculum, but she devoured every page. She had developed a fascination with the law, specifically, how justice could be built with knowledge, not emotion. One night, after final exams, she stood before the mirror in Mrs. Alora's hallway, her reflection staring back like an old friend she was finally learning to trust. You made it through the fire, she whispered. Now you learn how to hold it. Mrs. Alora noticed the change. One evening, she stepped into Rose's room and placed a crisp, white envelope on the desk. An acceptance letter arrived, she said, pride flickering across her face. Rose slowly unfolded it. It was from the State University's law faculty. Full scholarship. The first tear slipped down her cheek before she could stop it. I didn't think I'd ever be seen for who I am, she murmured. Alora sat beside her and held her hand. You were never invisible, Rose. You were just hidden in the wrong light. That night, Rose opened her old journal for the first time in 2 years. She didn't cry when she read it. She studied it. Every entry, every manipulation, every omission. She marked key incidents with sticky notes and underlined names with red pen. Her journal had stopped being a safe haven. It was now evidence, a quiet weapon, a growing fire that would one day burn through everything Bella had tried to bury. The first day of law school brought with it a new kind of intimidation. Students in crisp suits moved through campus with loud ambition, some already preparing for mock trials before the semester had even begun. Rose sat in the back row of her first class, taking notes with quiet precision. That's when Samantha Drew walked in, late, loud, and laughing at her own misplaced folder. She dropped into the empty seat beside Rose with a dramatic sigh. God, first class, and I've already embarrassed myself, she muttered, then turned to Rose. You look like you've read the syllabus 6 times. Rose didn't smile, but she replied, 7, actually. Samantha blinked, then burst into laughter. You're either a genius or someone I desperately need to sit next to all semester. From that moment, they became an unlikely pair, Samantha with her bold, unfiltered energy and Rose with her still waters that ran dangerously deep. Over time, Sam started peeling back Rose's layers without force. They studied late together, spent weekends debating ethics over street food, and learned each other's silences. But Rose never shared her past. Instead, she listened closely to Sam's stories about injustice in her community, her dream of building a practice to fight for the voiceless, and her hatred for the kind of women who use power to exploit the vulnerable. They act like the world owes them, Sam would say, her voice fierce. But people like us will build our justice with facts, not favors. Rose nodded often, storing those words like stones in her pocket. One night, as they walked across campus under the soft orange glow of campus lights, Sam nudged her and said, "You never talk about your family. Don't you miss them?" Rose paused, then looked up at the night sky. "No," she said flatly, "some things are better left buried." And with that, she knew one day she'd have to tell Samantha the truth, but not yet. Not until it could be used for something greater. During her third year, Rose secured an internship with a private investigative law firm specializing in corporate fraud. Most students applied for glamorous placements, but she wanted access to systems, databases, documents, loopholes. She rarely spoke to other interns, choosing instead to bury herself in files. One evening, while organizing archived fraud reports, a familiar name jumped off the page: Bella Adams. The room seemed to freeze. Her breath caught in her throat as her eyes scanned the first paragraph: allegations of tax evasion, bribe laundering, and falsified product reports tied to a cosmetics company now worth millions. The report had been submitted anonymously, dismissed due to lack of hard evidence. But the timestamp, just 2 years after Rose vanished. Her fingers trembled as she flipped the page, scanning receipts, emails, redacted names. Her stepmother had reinvented herself, not only as a CEO, but as a woman untouchable by the system. That night, Rose couldn't sleep. She sat by her dorm window, the city lights blurring through her tears. She whispered her father's name, wishing for a sign. "Did you know what she was?" she asked the silence. No answer came, but the ache in her chest was deafening. The next day, she copied the report onto a flash drive and tucked it into her notebook. She didn't tell Samantha yet. She needed time to process it alone. Later that week, she returned to the office and quietly searched for anything tied to Robert Adams. She found one document. His will had been quietly amended a month before his sudden death, removing Rose as primary beneficiary and naming Bella as sole executor. His signature looked forced, too shaky, too unlike the man she remembered. And just like that, something inside her hardened. Bella hadn't just stolen her future. She had rewritten the past. But this time, Rose had a pen too, and she was going to write the ending herself. Rose began working late at the firm under the guise of assisting with backlog files. But in truth, she was quietly assembling a puzzle only she understood. Her mind worked with a methodical calm: dates, names, contracts. She traced every subsidiary Bella's company owned, cross-referencing invoices with manufacturing records. The numbers didn't line up. Revenue was inflated, expenses masked through third-party ghost vendors, and yet none of it had been flagged. Bella had built her empire on a foundation of shadows. Rose carefully documented every inconsistency, printing files under anonymous logins, saving them to a drive she kept in her boot. Samantha noticed her withdrawing. "You haven't come to dinner in a week. What are you chasing?" Rose offered a vague smile. "Just trying to understand how people get away with so much." Sam squinted at her. "Sounds like you've got a target." Rose looked down. "I do." That weekend, Rose traveled alone to a courthouse 3 towns away where older business records were archived in dusty cabinets no one touched anymore. She sat in silence for hours, flipping through pages until she found the one thing she feared and needed: her father's death certificate. It listed cardiac arrest as the cause, but that the timing was odd. No witness signatures from the hospital, only Bella's. As she read further, a line chilled her. Patient was previously stable. Sudden decline post-medication. Rose's hands began to shake. She requested a certified copy and left the courthouse in a daze. That evening, she called Mrs. Elora. "Do you remember the night my father died?" Elora hesitated, then said, "Only that it happened right after Bella convinced him to cancel your return visit." Rose's throat tightened. Bella had silenced her for good, not just by stealing her name, but possibly by ending a life. She looked at the stack of papers on her desk, no longer just evidence. They were the silent cries of a girl forgotten. But not anymore. Now, she had something better than rage. She had proof, and she had a plan. The next few days passed in a surreal blur. Rose couldn't get the certificate out of her head. She studied the handwriting, the odd phrasing, and the missing hospital records that should have accompanied such a sudden death. There were too many blanks, too many silences. She booked a visit to the hospital listed and sat across from a weary administrator in a cramped records room. "I'm trying to trace my father's final file," she said calmly. The woman typed into the system, frowning. "Robert Adams. According to this, his chart was closed and transferred to private storage weeks after he died. But there's no request form. That's irregular." Rose leaned in. "Who requested the closure?" The woman scrolled. Only one name on the override. Bella Adams. She looked up. She said she was his wife. Rose swallowed. She was, kind of. The pieces were aligning like thunderclouds. That evening, Rose sat in the campus cafe with Samantha, visibly disturbed. Sam watched her over the rim of her mug. "All right, no more circling. Spill it." Rose hesitated, then slowly unzipped her bag, pulled out the certified death record, and slid it across the table. "This is my father. He didn't die naturally. I think she helped it happen." Samantha stared at the document, then looked at Rose, stunned. "Who is she?" Rose exhaled. "My stepmother, Bella Adams. She made sure no one came looking for me. Then she took everything." Sam blinked, trying to process it all. "You were the girl on the news years ago." "The missing teenager," Rose nodded once. "That was me. She sold me to keep me from ever rising." Silence hung between them, heavy and loaded. Then Samantha's jaw clenched. "Okay, we go after her legally. Quietly, precisely. We don't just bring her down, we unwrite her empire." For the first time, Rose felt something shift in her chest, not just pain or fear, but power. Bella had stolen years. Now Rose would take them back with the law. Samantha became more than a friend after that night. She became Rose's war counsel. Together, they crafted a long-term strategy, blending Sam's sharp legal instincts with Rose's first-hand understanding of Bella's tactics. "You don't fight women like her with rage," Sam advised. "You fight them with filings, clauses, and fine print. She buried you with silence, so let's bury her with evidence." Rose nodded, her heart steady for once. Every lunch break turned into a planning session. Every spare hour used to outline the legal traps they would lay. They researched corporate acquisition laws, whistleblower protections, and civil liability for forged documents. At night, Rose would study Bella's product launches, marketing speeches, and press interviews, each time hearing not a CEO, but a woman carefully crafting lies. Samantha even managed to get a contact inside a private investment firm who might pose as an interested buyer for Bella's company. "It's going to take time," Sam warned. "We have to make her feel like she's won before we take it all." Meanwhile, Rose applied for her legal license under her new identity, Rose Bennett, and passed the bar with flying colors. She declined law firms with prestige and instead joined a smaller, quieter firm that allowed her more flexibility. Jeremiah, ever her quiet anchor, reappeared once she reached out. They met at a discreet cafe, where she filled him in on everything. "So, it's time," he said, watching her carefully. "You're ready to come back." Rose looked down at her tea, then nodded. Not as her stepdaughter, as her undoing. Jeremiah offered a quiet, proud smile. "Let me know when to make the call. I'll move the right pieces." Rose returned home that night and sat in front of her mirror again. The woman who stared back was no longer trembling. Her eyes were still but not cold. Focused. She touched the edge of the death certificate and whispered, "For you, Dad. I'm going to make her sign away everything and not even realize who drew up the papers." Bella Adams Skincare had become a celebrated name in the cosmetic industry, often praised for its rapid rise and sleek branding. But beneath the glossy covers of beauty magazines, the company's financials were dangerously hollow. Rose and Samantha, now backed quietly by Jeremiah's investment firm, spent weeks studying Bella's most recent quarterly reports. The numbers looked clean at a glance, but a deeper look showed signs of liquidity strain, overstated asset value, inflated sales reports, and suspicious short-term loans from shell firms. "She's dressing a corpse," Samantha said one night, tapping a red line on a spreadsheet. "She's desperate to sell before it collapses." Rose nodded slowly. "Then we make her think she's finally found the perfect buyer, someone who sees her as a genius, not a fraud. The trap had to be elegant. No emotion, no slip. Jeremiah's team would pose as a foreign acquisition group looking to buy out beauty companies on the verge of expansion. The bait, a cash offer that looked too perfect to resist. To get closer, Jeremiah requested a meeting through a disguised holding company, one that didn't link to Rose or Samantha in any way. Bella's assistant replied within 24 hours. She was intrigued. As the fake interest grew, Bella's social media presence increased. She began flaunting her company's global momentum online, as if already preparing for the exit. "She wants validation more than money," Rose observed, watching Bella's latest interview on her laptop. "That's where she's weakest." Samantha leaned in. "Let's build her dream deal, down to the last comma." Over the next 2 weeks, Rose personally drew up a pre-acquisition interest memo. She wrote every word as though she were a lawyer with no connection to Bella, weaving in compliments and strategic ambiguities. The moment Bella signed her name on the preliminary non-disclosure, it gave them access to documents her real lawyers never thought she'd release to a stranger. And once those documents reached Rose, she didn't flinch. She read them like poetry written in code. "She doesn't realize she's already transferring her empire," Rose whispered, folding the files. "She thinks she's winning, but she's just submitting evidence." Signed in ink. The day of Bella's annual gala arrived like a storm of silk and perfume. Held at a luxurious rooftop hotel, the event was meant to showcase the brand's latest product line and attract media attention. For the first time in years, Rose stepped into Bella's world, not through the front door, but through shadows. She wore a simple black dress, slipped in with Samantha's contact, and moved like a ghost among the marble floors and high society guests. Her eyes scanned the crowd until they found her. Bella stood at the center of it all, laughing with false modesty as reporters circled her. Her face hadn't changed much, still perfect, still poised. But Rose noticed the strain behind her smile. The cracks were starting to show. "She's clinging to something that's already falling apart," Samantha whispered beside her, equally disguised. Rose's jaw tightened. Let her enjoy her moment. She doesn't know the stage is made of sand. From a corner of the room, Rose watched Bella work the crowd with ease, hugging investors, flirting with journalists, selling the image of a woman who had built an empire with grace. But there was something else that caught Rose's attention. A framed portrait near the product showcase, a photo of Bella with Robert. It was cropped and edited, but unmistakable. Her father's eyes stared out with a warmth Rose hadn't seen in over a decade. Her breath caught. The audacity. Bella had paraded his face around like a symbol of legitimacy. "She used him to give herself weight," Rose murmured. Samantha leaned in, her voice low. "And soon, she'll lose everything that name gave her." Just then, Bella walked past them, her attention fixed elsewhere. She didn't notice the woman watching her, didn't see the daughter she once erased. But Rose didn't need to be seen, not yet. As the crowd cheered for Bella's toast, Rose turned away, slipping out into the night, her heart pounding, not with fear, but with fire. "I'm not coming to haunt her," she said as they entered the car. "I'm coming to unseat her, legally, quietly, and permanently." The morning after the gala, Rose traveled alone to the outskirts of the city. She hadn't returned to the cemetery in over a decade, not since the day she watched the rain fall on a casket while Bella clutched a black umbrella with perfectly dry eyes. The path to Robert Adams' grave was lined with wildflowers, now overgrown. As she approached the tombstone, she noticed the cracks in the lettering. Robert James Adams, beloved husband, trusted father, but nowhere on it was her name. Bella had buried her even in stone. Rose dropped to her knees, a quiet sob escaping her. "You never knew what she did. You didn't even get the chance to ask," she whispered. "But I'm still here, Dad. I made it. And she's going to pay for everything." Her fingers grazed the edge of the tombstone as if searching for something solid to hold on to. She pulled a folded photo from her coat, one of her and her father on her 7th birthday, and laid it gently at the base. The air was still, as if the trees themselves were listening. Rose stayed there for hours, speaking softly about her childhood, her pain, her fear, and her plan. "I'm a lawyer now. I've built everything from ashes. You used to tell me, Rose, justice isn't loud. It's patient. I never forgot that." She stood up slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. "I couldn't save you, but I can make sure her legacy ends where yours was stolen." As she turned to leave, something felt lighter in her chest, not relief, but resolve. When she returned to the city, she opened her laptop and drafted a full acquisition agreement using Bella's own submitted terms. Each clause was a blade, buried in legal language so precise, Bella would think she was winning until the last signature sealed her loss. Rose titled the file Final Draft B Adams Holdings Transfer and saved it. Then she closed the laptop and whispered to herself, "Next time I see her, I'll be on the other side of the table and she'll hand me the keys herself." Rose walked into the conference room of Cole and Winters LLP wearing a charcoal gray suit, her badge clipped low, her face calm. She was no longer the girl watching from the shadows. She was now the lead counsel for a high-profile acquisition that would appear on headlines once signed. Only a select few within the firm knew her full identity, and fewer still understood the gravity of the deal she was about to execute. The holding company posing as the buyer, Ardent Sphere Capital, had received the green light. Jeremiah's team had done their part flawlessly, crafting a pitch that made Bella believe she was about to be acquired by a global expansion syndicate that wanted to license her brand internationally. Rose's job was to finalize the acquisition terms, all written to look like a standard exit package. With one devastating difference. Bella would sign away not only her rights, but her ownership structure. "I want a clause that triggers silent control once she sells over 50%, Rose instructed the junior associate reviewing the draft. "Make it subtle. Line 26, paragraph 4. Use soft legalese. I want her to believe she's protected." After work, Rose sat at her apartment window with Samantha, reviewing the last few documents. "She's going to read it, you know," Sam said, sipping tea. "Even a narcissist like Bella will glance at the small print." Rose smiled faintly. "She won't see the real risk, because we've offered her what she wants most, an exit built on applause." They had designed the acquisition to be ego-driven. Bella would be positioned as the face of a legacy brand, the woman who cashed out at her peak. "And you're absolutely sure you're ready for the face-to-face?" Sam asked. Rose stared ahead. "I'm not doing this for a dramatic confrontation. I'm doing it because justice sometimes comes wearing a pen, not a sword." A brief silence passed before Sam nodded. "Then let's get her to the table." The meeting was scheduled at a luxury hotel's executive suite, Neutral Ground. Bella had requested it, wanting the optics to reflect success. She had no idea the lawyer she was about to face across that table was the same girl she once shoved into silence. Bella arrived at the hotel in a tailored ivory pantsuit, exuding success from head to toe. The suite had been arranged exactly as she liked, subtle elegance, a carafe of citrus water, classical music playing softly in the background. She paced near the tall glass windows overlooking the city skyline, rehearsing her talking points. "Let them see a visionary," she whispered to her reflection, adjusting her pearl earring. Moments later, the door opened and Jeremiah walked in, flanked by Samantha. Bella turned, her expression poised. "Mr. Warren," she said, using the alias she believed. "Your timing is perfect." Jeremiah shook her hand, his face unreadable. "We appreciate you making space for this final review." Bella gestured for them to sit. "Anything for the right price," she said with a smirk. Samantha remained quiet, her gaze steady. Bella noticed the look, but chalked it up to junior lawyer nerves. "Where's your legal counsel?" she asked. Jeremiah leaned back. "She's just finishing another file. She'll join us shortly, but the documents are ready for preliminary review." Bella picked up the top folder and began scanning. "This is straightforward. Royalty retention clause, percentage release, timed withdrawal from board. It's generous." Her eyes skimmed faster now, drinking in the terms she thought she controlled. "You know, I've turned down offers 3 times this amount. But your team, you get vision." Samantha's lips curled slightly. "We try." Bella looked pleased with herself. "You'll get the signed draft today. Let's move the narrative quickly. I want press releases ready by next week." Jeremiah nodded. "We'll let our counsel finalize the execution clause." Bella folded her arms. "And where is she?" The door clicked behind them, and footsteps echoed softly on the marble. Bella turned and froze. A woman in a black suit stepped in, carrying a thick portfolio. Her stride was calm, her face unmistakable. Rose placed the file on the table, locked eyes with Bella, and said gently, "Forgive the delay. I'm Rose Bennett, legal counsel for the buyer." Bella's hand, still holding a glass of water, began to tremble slightly. For the first time in her career, she was speechless. The silence in the room was suffocating. Bella stared at Rose as if looking at a ghost that refused to stay buried. Her jaw clenched as she struggled to speak. "This is some kind of joke." Rose remained composed, opening the folder. "No joke, just the final stage of our transaction. I trust you've reviewed the clauses." Bella's gaze darted to Jeremiah and Samantha, who offered no hint of emotion. She sat back slowly, the color draining from her face. "You're alive," she whispered, "and standing on the other side of your table," Rose replied. "Just as you planned, only not in chains." Bella's composure began to unravel, but she quickly forced a chuckle. "You think this intimidates me? You can't prove anything," Rose smiled thinly. "I don't need to prove who you were. You already signed who you are." She turned the pages slowly, pointing at the control clause Bella had glossed over. "This language, Section 4, Subsection 3, transfers primary voting rights. You're stepping down the moment you sign." Bella lunged for the folder, flipping through the contract. Her fingers paused at the clause, then moved to the signature page. The reality began to settle in her eyes. "This deal, it's not just a buyout. It's a transfer of everything," Rose said evenly. "Your patents, your name, your board seat, all tied to a legally binding acquisition. You've already agreed. The press release is the only thing you still think you own." Samantha leaned forward. "You wanted a glamorous exit. Now you'll get it. Headlines, applause, everything, until they realize what you walked away from." Bella stood up abruptly, her voice tight. "You tricked me." "You underestimated me," Rose corrected. "And that's always been your mistake." For a moment, neither woman moved. The past hovered in the air, thick and electric. But Rose remained seated, unshaken. "Sign the contract, Bella," she said softly. "Do it for the cameras, for the brand, for the woman you pretended to be." Bella sat slowly, her hand trembling as she picked up the pen. She signed, and with that stroke she handed over the empire she built on silence, to the very voice she tried to erase. As the ink dried on the final page, Bella's posture stiffened. Her fingers hovered above the contract as if she could snatch the signature back. But it was too late. Jeremiah quietly folded the documents into his briefcase while Samantha stood and adjusted her blazer. Bella couldn't speak, her throat constricted by disbelief and a silent, rising rage. She looked at Rose, but the young woman didn't gloat. There was no cruel smile, no smug satisfaction. Just calm, precise finality. Rose rose from her seat slowly, walking toward the large windows of the suite. Her heels echoed softly, measured and sure. Bella's eyes dropped to the sound and landed on Rose's shoes. Her breath caught. They were the same pair Bella had thrown away years ago, black leather, slightly scuffed. She had laughed then, calling them cheap girls' shoes. Now, they clicked across the floor of a room she no longer controlled. "You planned this," Bella finally muttered, her voice brittle. "You've been plotting this for years." Rose turned slowly. "I planned survival. The rest was just timing." Bella took a step forward. "You used my weaknesses, my brand, my ambition, my hunger. You weaponized silence," Rose interrupted. "You gambled that I'd never find my voice. But I did, and then I learned the law." Bella's hands shook as she reached for her phone. "I'll call my lawyer. We'll undo this." Samantha spoke up then, her voice clipped. "We had it reviewed by 2 corporate judges and filed pre-approval with the state. You walked in here willingly. You signed everything yourself. You even requested the location. There's no loophole, only consequences." Bella collapsed into the chair, the room spinning. Who are you really?" she whispered. Rose didn't blink. "I'm the girl you tried to sell like property, the one you wrote off as weak. I'm also now the legal majority owner of your company." She turned to leave, her voice low and steady. "Enjoy the applause, Bella. It's the last thing that still belongs to you." The suite emptied quickly after the signing. Bella remained in her chair, staring into space while the remaining assistants tidied up the untouched wine and appetizer trays. Her phone vibrated with messages from board members, congratulatory texts from investors, and a congratulatory email thread from media partners already prepping her exit story. Everything was moving exactly as she had imagined, except none of it belonged to her anymore. She had signed away her rights, And the worst part? She hadn't even realized it until the last pen stroke. Moments later, a knock came at the door. She flinched. "Come in," she said weakly. Rose stepped in once more, alone this time. Bella stiffened. "What more do you want?" Rose walked over, set a small envelope on the coffee table, and sat across from her. "Closure," she said simply. "Not for me, for you." Bella glared. "Spare me the lecture." "You got what you came for," Rose nodded. "Yes, I did, but you should understand how." She leaned forward, her voice calm but firm. "You always said I was too quiet, that I'd never make it, but that quiet let me study you. It helped me listen, memorize your lies, understand your ego, and build a better kind of power." She slid the envelope closer. "Inside is a timeline of every violation you buried, every name you erased, every check you manipulated. I've sent copies to the authorities. This isn't about revenge anymore. It's about record." Bella didn't touch the envelope. Her voice was low and hollow. "I made you who you are." Rose gave a half smile, not cruel but clear. "You built the wound. I did the healing." She stood and walked to the door. "For what it's worth, I don't hate you. But I'll never forget you. You were the storm that broke me, but also the reason I learned how to rebuild." Bella's reply never came. The door clicked shut behind Rose, leaving Bella in silence, at last on the receiving end of the quiet she once used as a weapon. The next 48 hours unfolded like a symphony of irony. Bella's smiling face appeared in headlines across the country. CEO sells skincare empire in record deal. The media sang praises of her graceful exit, quoting her curated statement about embracing new challenges and inspiring women worldwide. But behind the scenes, power shifted like tectonic plates. Rose now sat at the head of the boardroom table, formerly Bella's seat. Jeremiah served as interim financial advisor, and Samantha was appointed lead legal strategist for restructuring. The first board meeting under Rose's leadership was swift and clean. "We're auditing everything," she announced, "and rewriting internal protocols to reflect integrity, not intimidation." No one objected. Most of the executives had suspected things were crumbling. They just hadn't expected the collapse to come wearing a lawyer's heels and a surname Bella never saw coming. Later that evening, Rose reviewed the transition forms and digitally authorized her full voting control. With one click, the last legal thread tying Bella to the company snapped. Meanwhile, regulators received an anonymous dossier with evidence of tax inconsistencies and forged health claims from Bella's early product lines. An investigation began quietly. Bella hadn't just lost her business. She was now a liability to everything she once represented. At home, Rose sat by her window with the city below, its lights blinking like distant echoes of everything she had overcome. Samantha joined her with 2 cups of tea. "You did it," she said gently. "It's done." Rose shook her head. "Not done, but the ink is dry, and this time, I wrote every word." They clinked mugs, not in celebration, but in quiet reverence. Justice hadn't shouted, it had signed. And for Rose, that was more powerful than any revenge could ever be. The press conference was scheduled 3 days after the takeover, strategic, calculated, and perfectly timed. Rose wore a navy blue suit and stood behind a podium with the company's new emblem displayed boldly behind her. Samantha stood at her side, papers neatly stacked and every word vetted to precision. Dozens of journalists filled the room, cameras flashing, fingers poised on keyboards. Rose took a steady breath before stepping forward. "Thank you for joining us. Today marks a new chapter for this company, not just in leadership, but in values. We are transitioning from silence to transparency, from glamour to accountability." Whispers rippled across the room. One reporter raised a hand. "Can you confirm if Ms. Bella Adams was removed, or did she step down willingly?" Rose kept her gaze steady. "Ms. Adams signed the transition of ownership voluntarily under a legally binding agreement. That is all I will say on that matter for now." The room stirred, but no one dared press further, not yet. The second half of the conference turned toward corporate responsibility. Samantha took the mic, outlining internal reforms, third-party audits, full disclosure of ingredient sources, whistleblower protection policies. "We are not just rebranding a name," she said clearly. "We are restoring trust." As the room applauded, Rose caught the eye of a younger journalist in the back, holding an old tabloid article, The one from years ago reporting Rose as a missing teen. Their eyes met. The woman mouthed, "Is that you?" Rose didn't respond, but her stillness said enough. After the conference, as she stepped into the elevator, Samantha nudged her. "You do realize you just became the face of poetic justice." Rose looked out at the descending lobby. No, just the voice that survived long enough to be heard. That night, as news outlets ran with the headline, "Former missing girl now leads empire she was sold away from," Bella sat in her apartment, staring at the screen, her legacy rewritten by the very person she tried to erase. The knock came just after noon. Bella, disheveled and withdrawn, opened the door to two plainclothes investigators. "Bella Adams?" one of them asked. She nodded slowly. "You're under investigation for fraud, identity tampering, and obstruction of a federal trafficking case. You'll need to come with us." Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. They handed her a folded notice, an official warrant backed by the Financial Crimes Unit. Her fingers trembled as she took it. She hadn't seen it coming, not like this. The legal system had always worked in her favor before. She tried to speak, to say it was all a mistake, but the words tangled in her throat. The officers gave her 5 minutes to change. Inside, she sat on the edge of her bed, stunned, the weight of consequences finally catching up with her. Her hands brushed across her vanity, where the last glossy magazine bearing her face now felt like a relic of another life. As she was escorted out through the back entrance of her building to avoid paparazzi, Bella could see her neighbors watching from behind blinds and balconies. Their whispers stung more than the headlines. She had spent years curating perfection, and now it unraveled in silence, just as she'd once used silence to destroy a child's truth. At the precinct, the questions came fast and clinical. Did you knowingly sign off on falsified records? Were you aware your husband's medical release form was altered? Can you explain your connection to the 2009 trafficking syndicate? Bella's answers were shaky, incomplete. Her lawyer requested time to prepare a defense, but the investigators were already cross-referencing her digital trail. One folder in particular, an anonymously submitted document marked Red Ledger, carried exact dates, names, and transaction IDs. Her voice cracked for the first time in years when she whispered, "Who sent that?" One officer glanced up from the file. "Says here, submitted by Rose Bennett." Bella closed her eyes. Her past hadn't just caught up with her, it had put on heels, walked into court, and pulled the rug out beneath her legacy. Alone in her new office, Rose stood in front of the full-length mirror, this time not to find strength, but to reflect on what it meant to finally arrive. The mirror no longer held the frightened girl who once wrote pain into a hidden journal. It held a woman who had survived, fought, and conquered without raising her voice. Her expression was unreadable, but her presence had never been clearer. She reached into her drawer and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Inside was the old necklace her father gave her on her 12th birthday, the only personal item she'd managed to reclaim after Bella's betrayal. Clasping it around her neck, she whispered, "This is for you, Dad. Not because I won, but because I didn't disappear." She turned back to her desk, where framed articles now sat beside case files, not to boast, but to remind her where silence used to live. Later that evening, Samantha found her seated alone, sipping tea as the city skyline twinkled beyond the glass walls. "You've been quiet," Sam said gently. "Victory hangover," Rose smiled faintly. "Just absorbing it all. I spent so many years running from the past. Now it's filed, boxed, and shelved, but the weight still lingers." Samantha sat beside her. "You turned your pain into law. That doesn't erase the scars, but it does rewrite the ending." Rose nodded slowly. "I never wanted to become famous. I just wanted to be free." Outside, the wind blew against the tall windows, the sound soft and hollow, like the voice of the girl Rose used to be, finally quiet because she had been heard. "Do you think it's truly over?" Rose asked. Samantha exhaled. "No, but now, you're the one holding the pen." Rose looked down at her hands, the same hands Bella once tried to bind. She curled her fingers slowly and whispered, "Then I'll write something no one will ever silence again." The legal office was quiet as Rose sat across from the clerk, her fingers lightly drumming the table. A single form lay before her, application for name restoration. The final legal step. She had operated under Rose Bennett for over a decade, but now it was time to take back what had once been hers. "Do you wish to proceed with the change back to Rose Adams?" the clerk asked gently. Rose paused, looking at the signature line. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "It's time to go home to the name they tried to erase." With one graceful stroke of the pen, she reclaimed her identity, not for applause, not for headlines, but for the girl who once clung to hope in the shadows. The room didn't erupt in cheers, but the quiet was sweeter than any standing ovation. It was her moment, intimate and irreversible. Later that day, Rose made a quiet drive to the cemetery with a small wooden box beside her. Dressed in a simple white blouse and navy trousers, she walked the familiar path toward her father's grave. The overgrown weeds had been cleared recently. Samantha had sent a groundskeeper, silently honoring what the place meant to Rose. She knelt beside the headstone and gently opened the box. Inside was her birth certificate, now legally reissued, bearing her original name, Rose Lorraine Adams. "I thought I had to bury you to survive," she whispered to the ground. "But now I know. I had to become everything you believed I could be." She placed the certificate beneath a flat stone, anchoring it in the soil with a single white rose. For a long moment, she sat in silence, the wind brushing softly through the trees, like her father's voice wrapping around her one last time. "I made it back," she said finally. "Not broken, not bitter, just risen." As she stood to leave, she didn't look back. Some goodbyes aren't in words. They're in the way we keep walking forward. The courtroom was silent except for the creak of chairs and the soft hum of the ceiling fan. Rose sat beside Samantha and Jeremiah, dressed in a tailored suit that commanded attention without effort. On the other side of the room sat Bella, now pale, hands cuffed in her lap, her once sharp eyes dulled by defeat. The judge read aloud the findings: fraudulent financial activity, deliberate obstruction of justice, and probable involvement in a human trafficking ring. Bella barely moved as the charges echoed through the room. No one shouted, no one cried. This wasn't a scene for drama. It was a burial of illusions of stolen years of power wielded wrongly. As the sentence was pronounced, Rose didn't blink. Bella would face time, restitution, and public disgrace. But more than that, she would live with the knowledge that the girl she tried to bury had returned to become the hand that closed the courtroom door behind her. Outside, reporters swarmed with questions, but Rose didn't stop to answer. She walked straight to the steps, the wind catching her hair as Samantha followed quietly behind. "You could have said something," Sam said softly. "To the press, the crowd, even to her." Rose shook her head. "There's no need. The papers were the story." She signed them with pride, never realizing they were her confession. The sun broke through the clouds as they reached the curb. Jeremiah opened the car door, but Rose paused and turned back to glance at the building one last time. Not with spite, not with vengeance, just clarity. "I thought I needed revenge," she murmured, "but I only needed the truth to be louder than her lies." And with that, she stepped into the car, her reflection in the tinted glass showing not a survivor, but a victor. Justice hadn't come with screams or fists. It came in a folder, in ink, in the silence Bella never thought would fight back. And that silence had become the loudest sound of all. Here's the Bible verse, meaning in context. This verse perfectly captures the soul of Rose's journey. Though injustice seemed to reign for years, judgment came in its time, not with spectacle, but with purpose. It is a reminder that no evil act escapes divine timing, and justice, though delayed, is never denied when truth is planted with patience. Moral of the story. Explanation. Rose's story teaches that dignity, truth, and quiet perseverance can outlast even the most calculated cruelty. You don't need to shout to be heard, and you don't need vengeance to win. When you rise from what was meant to destroy you, and do so with wisdom, grace, and courage, you don't just reclaim your life, you rewrite the story. That's the end of the story. What did you learn from this story? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Leave a like, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on post notification so that you'll be notified whenever we drop our next videos. Also, share this video to someone who might be interested. Thank you so much for